Hello, I'm Riley, and this is the Diegetic Advancement Podcast. Okay, episode 8. Primarily going to be a call-in episode this week. I have a few calls on the AD&D rating system, a call on my open table game, and I'll provide a little bit of an update on how that's going, and a call on my narrative wargame, and I'll also provide an update there. First up, I've got a call from Joe from the Hindsightless podcast, Daniel from Bandits Keep, and Mirke from Mirke the Meek, all talking about the AD&D rating system episode. So I'm just going to let them play out, and then I'll add my thoughts after.
Hey, what's up, Riley? It's Joe. So, I know you were mostly asking Daniel and Jason to call in about the rating system in the AD&D, but I thought I'd call in too. I didn't play a lot of AD&D as a kid, hardly any. We mostly played MERP, but I do know about the rating system. I've read the rating system, and I'm not a fan of the rating system. And for the main reason, besides all the critiques of the rating system that you mentioned, I also don't like that it totally prescribes the way players have to play their characters. And I think that sort of goes against what a role playing game is. It's like, if that's the case, then why not just play a board game? If you have to play your fighter this particular way, just play some sort of dungeon exploration board game. I thought that the experience point system for Dungeon World was quite a bit different than the rating system, because in Dungeon World you can go about fulfilling those ways to get experience points in a multitude of different ways, and it's the whole group coming up with whether you did or didn't do that and things like that, as opposed to just the dungeon master. So yeah, I thought that was pretty different from the AD&D. I thought the Blades in the Dark version was much closer, because Blades in the Dark had a few things. Did you do X thing in X way? Whereas in Dungeon World, it was, did you complete this thing? But you could do it any way you wanted to, as opposed to AD&D, where you have to do specific actions in specific ways in order to get a high rating. So yeah, that's why I don't like it, because it's just too prescriptive. Anyway, man, great stuff. Keep it up. Take it easy. Peace out.
Hey, Riley. Try number 4. Let's see if I can do this short. I will summarize my thoughts. I like how you are making the connection there, and I can definitely see where you're coming from. I think the major thing that's different, though, and the reason why I don't like the AD&D one, is that it is the dungeon master who is deciding, not the players. I think that if at the end of the session you sit around in a circle and you say, okay, do you think that you played your thief in the way that that character, would be played or should be played or whatever? And the player thinks to themselves and goes, you know what, really? I didn't. My thief really should have done these other things, so I'm not going to give myself a point. Oh, cool. Now, yes, you have to have I'm going to air quoting here, the right kind of players to do that kind of thing. And I think people playing more story games are those kind of players. So yeah, I don't think that it's so much the question of, did you use your thief skills to improve? Because I actually like that part of it. That's part of the training / rating system I like in AD&D. I like that it's, in theory, you're doing the things that are what your class gets better at, and thus you should be doing them. But I don't think, and again, I have to reread it again, but I'm pretty sure it's not as clear cut as all that, right? It's like, did your thief use their open locks skill? Okay, cool. You did that. You get an A rating, right? Or however you want to do it. It's more like, did you act in accordance to the class? Well, what does that even mean, right? It means whatever the DM wants it to mean, and I think that's where you're going to have issues. So anyways, that's why I don't love the AD&D system. I don't love rating people. I don't want people rating me. And that's the reason why I don't like it. The other stuff is fine. It's not my favorite way to do things. Coriolis has a system like that where you like check off boxes, and basically people try to game it. In my experience, they'll do the things. They look at those things and those boxes and they go, I need to do those things in order to get experience points, so I'll do them. So you could look at it and be like, that's cool because they'll do stealthy things. But does that also mean that if you're doing a heavy roleplay session where negotiation needs to happen, that one character that's supposed to do stuff through violence is now going to effectively sabotage the group because their character does stuff through violence? To me, that's not a fun way to play the game. And it's, for lack of a better word, very selfish. So like, I don't love that. I just don't. So it's just not the way I play. And that's why I don't like it. I am super curious to hear what Jason has to say. And I will continue to listen to the rest of your episode now.
Hey Riley, this is Mirke. Just listened to your latest episode. It's very fascinating. I would never have made the connection between AD&D ratings and the story game experience questions. So that's pretty neat. I guess one difference is with the rating system, and I'm no expert. Uh, the GM is imposing that rating. It's their fiat essentially. But with those questions, like in Blades in the Dark and Dungeon World, it's a conversation. It's the player in some of those cases answering the question, and um, you know, so it's a slightly different power dynamic, I would think, but it's still a very interesting connection. And it's funny that these these newer games aren't so new in some ways. Uh, it it does pay to have a breadth of knowledge about modern games and old school games and just old games. So very cool. Looking forward to the war game stuff, and talk to you later. Take care.
Okay, and I've just cut a little bit of Jason's call that I'll play later in the episode where he talks about the rating system. I'll let that play out and then I'll provide my comments.
Hey, Jason here. I'll talk on my show about your comments for the story games and the AD&D rating system. I won't tie up this call on that, but I was very happy to hear you compare the two, and pleasantly surprised with that that dialogue. So take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, that's it on the rating system. As always, really appreciate everyone taking the time to listen and call in with your thoughts. Really interesting. Lots of similarities, so I grouped them up. Firstly, I sympathize with Daniel. Number of attempts to record something, especially when you're trying to condense something down. Very difficult, so thank you for persevering. There were two commonalities, I thought. First, we kind of prefer the story system because of the difference between the game master providing the rating versus the group or rating yourself, and I totally agree. That's you don't want to feel like you've been told that you're playing bad by one of your friends, or you don't have to tell your friend that they're playing bad, even though you're not. That's not actually what you're telling them. You're not saying you're a bad player. It can come off that way. So I think flipping the responsibility onto the group or a self-rating system definitely gets rid of that. And that the system is perhaps prescriptive. Now that's reminded me that I actually didn't read the AD&D system last episode. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, it says, the gaining of sufficient experience points is necessary to indicate that a character is eligible to gain a level of experience, but the actual award is a matter for you, the DM, to decide. Consider the natural functions of each class of character. Consider also the professed alignment of each character. Briefly assess the performance of each character after an adventure. Did he or she perform basically in the character of his or her class? Were his or her actions in keeping with his or her professed alignment? Mentally classify the overall performance as excellent, superior, fair, or poor. It then goes on to provide some examples like clerics who refuse to help and heal or do not remain faithful to their deity. Okay. It really only asks two questions, and did you perform in the role of your character? That fits very much the Blades in the Dark question. And did you fit your alignment? That fits one of the Dungeon World questions quite well. It doesn't really say anything much, and much more than that. And then the excellent rating says few deviations from the norm. So you're allowed to have some minor deviations from your alignment and your class and still achieve an excellent rating. Though I will agree that despite the system not necessarily being prescriptive in just what I've read, the fighter class and the thief class and the cleric class can be prescriptive. It's a very specific archetype that the player might want to deviate from, and they say, well, my character is not the fighter that you're thinking of, it's this different kind of fighter, and I'm not sure that this system necessarily supports that. Of course, it's also up to the GM fiat. Joe pointed out that the dungeon world is much more freeform, I think, and Blades in the Dark is a little bit more prescriptive, and so that does feel a little bit more similar to the AD&D system. Daniel pointed out that he likes that doing the thing makes you better at it. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's a good part of the system as well. But he also raised this interesting point that having these strict XP systems in something like Blades in the Dark can be quite disruptive. If you only get XP for being violent, you might be violent in a case where that's not the best thing. I think that might be okay for a story game, but it's not really okay at most OSR tables. Doesn't really fit. And I haven't really talked about this on the show, but I think that's one of the beauties of Gold for XP. I've talked about how I like players to be able to understand and exploit the system. And Gold for XP allows them to do that. They understand the reward mechanics, but it's also flexible. So they understand what they need to do to play well, and they can go about it in any which way they want, rather than you must be violent to play well, or any other which way. So whilst I do kind of like the rating system, I don't know. I just feel like everyone's an adventurer, and Gold for XP does a pretty good job of that. Yeah. Interesting point from Mirke on having a depth of knowledge or breadth of knowledge of different game systems across genre and era. I certainly tell myself that it's a good thing as I add another system to my drive-through cart, but yeah, I'm sure you don't need to know every single system. But it is interesting to look back and draw these parallels and see how different systems handle the same thing in often very similar ways. That's all I've really got to add there. Thank you a lot for your calls. Oh, yes, as Jason mentioned, he talks a little bit more about it on his show, so if you'd like to hear what Jason has to say, go check that out. I feel like it is a 1 versus 3 situation there, but if anyone wants to join Jason's side or gang up against him, feel free to continue to call in. We can continue the conversation, but I'll leave my thoughts there. Next up, I'll finish the call from Jason, which I said that I chopped up. He's got some comments on my open table game, which I'm hopefully running in a week and a half. Take it away, Jason.
Hey, Jason here. Just wanted to say I haven't run any open table in-person games, so hopefully other people will call in about that. But as far as the magic items go, if somebody leaves the game, I would just let that stand, and I wouldn't worry about redistributing it or any of that. If you follow the rules for distribution of magic items in OD&D, there should be plenty in the game, so it shouldn't be a big deal, at least in my opinion. But I'm interested to hear how that plays out and how you do decide to do it, and keep up the great work. So take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Yeah, I think that's good advice. That's likely what I'm going to do. I can see maybe a case where some magic item that's very powerful or is sort of the crux of the player's plans to enact something, that if that were to disappear because of a player leaving, I'd likely bring that back in. But for your regular run-of-the-mill magic items, yeah, I think that's just fine. Just hand out more. And as you said, the system, OD&D, kind of supports handing out enough. Though I do have an update on that, and I'll take you back to what I'd said in the episode that Jason's responding to, is that I wanted to run a open table original Dungeons and Dragons game. I still do want to do that, but I ended up advertising for a short 3 to 4 session run of Dungeon Crawl Classics. I just wanted to get my feet wet, test the waters in the role-playing scene of my city, and this is something a little bit more familiar with running. I think it's also a little bit closer to 5e in terms of I'm not going to kill so many characters, except for the funnel, perhaps. I'm not taking so much power away from this. Not a complete shock to the system, I don't think. So that's what I've done, and I posted an ad in the game store's Discord on Reddit for my city, which bombed, and on a few of the role-playing and Dungeons and Dragons Facebook pages. I only got one bite on the Discord page. I got 3 of my friends who I just messaged personally to join, but there was a lot of success on Facebook, actually. So those pages don't get that much activity, and so I was a little bit hesitant in that. Okay, well, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of recruiting and whatnot going on. I do wonder if there's an active group of players looking for games, and to my surprise, there was. I got I can't remember how many, but I have 8 people signed up, and we're playing on Tuesday, the 6th of Feb, our first game. So I'm really excited for that. Hopefully people don't get too much of a shock. I've tried to explain what Dungeon Crawl Classics is, make sure they're not thinking they're going to rock up for a 5e game. Had a couple of questions about, do I need to build a character first? and definitely not. If anyone knows DCC, I will be running a funnel with 8 players, though I wouldn't be surprised if 1 or 2 don't rock up. It's going to be a lot, so I think starting with 2 characters each, I'm going to have a bunch of pre-filled character sheets that I'll generate on Purple Sorcerer, and if they die, I'll just chuck them another sheet and get them going. I'm going to run a funnel that I've run before, which is a hole in the sky. I think it illustrates the craziness that you can get up to in DCC. It's got a lot of fun encounters, and you start off interacting with a Chaos Lord or God, I can't remember, rescuing another Chaos God from another plane. That's not your typical level 0 adventure from 5th edition D&D. So I'm looking forward to running that. I've run it once before, and it went well. It's got an awesome ending where you get to spin on the Wheel of Fate and see if you get a bonus or other weird things might happen to your surviving characters. And then I'll likely run some of the classics over the next few sessions, and we'll see where we end up. If the group's going really well and enjoying it, perhaps we'll continue, perhaps not. I'll be sure to let you know how that first game goes and how it goes in the future. As I said, really looking forward to it. Should be fun. Okay, thanks, Jason. Now I've got a call from Sam on my narrative war game. Take it away.
G'day, Riley. I really think you come from a different world of gaming. One where a narrative war game is a competition war game. So I think that's what you're designing. You're designing a points-based, balanced competition gamey war game. I'm guessing the kinds of war games you play are always balanced with points. If you want a real narrative, throw out the points and focus on the scenario. That's my opinion. I guess it's my perspective on wargaming, which is different. It comes from the 80s. Anyway, I'm guessing I'm a lot older than you. Whatever, as long as you're having fun, but I wouldn't call what you're doing a narrative game. Like, maybe a narrative will come out of it, but I think the focus for you is on the competition, the balance, the fairness. Anyway, just my thoughts. It's a surprise you call that a narrative war game.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show and call in. You're right, I am very likely younger than you, and most of my experience is in points-based competitive wargaming. Though I think what's happened is I have a miscommunication. That episode really was describing the rules for my players, and they're going to be playing one game, and I'm almost going to be playing another. And when I say narrative war game, I'm talking about the game that I'm going to be playing solo. So I want to describe the first third of the turn of my of the first turn, and hopefully that will give you a better picture of how this system is going to work to generate narrative war game skirmishes. So I've got 4 players. 3 of them have called into this episode: Mirke, Daniel, and Jason, and a friend of mine, Bobby. And each of them were allocated a number of points they could generate a warband from. They can then split those up into groups and send them around a map, a hex map of a city. And there are a bunch of nodes which their goal is to harvest them and bring them back. And how many points they get determines how successful they were. That is definitely points-based competitive. But all those players are doing are building those lists and providing orders to move around the map and where to harvest. When they come into contact with each other, opposing forces, we have a skirmish. And so I've mapped out the first third, roughly, of movement from the first turn, and I want to describe, there's 3 skirmishes that are going to occur, and I just want to describe each of them. So Mirke has split his forces, but actually moved them all in unison to the center. That's where the higher value resource is. So as he's moving through, he's encountered a force from Daniel. Daniel sent out a small force to try and set an ambush at one of the gates to the inner sector. They're both arriving in that hex at the exact same time, so Daniel's forces haven't been able to set up the ambush, but they're a small force versus a extremely large force. So taking in the context of the meta system, I guess, the overarching system of just these orders and moving around, I do have a narrative in my mind, a narrative skirmish, and I can build that. We've got uneven forces in that Daniel's got this small splinter force meeting the full force of Mirke, and each of those forces are going to have different goals. Mirke has provided me some guidance on how his forces are going to act in different situations, and in this he wants to crush Daniel's forces. But Daniel doesn't want to attack Mirke. There's nothing to be gained. Mirke hasn't generated any resources on his turn yet, so he's just going to want to evade. So I build a narrative skirmish where Daniel's forces need to get away from the large forces. Okay, skirmish 2. Daniel also sends part of his force down to a node. Jason has sent a force to that node and arrived there before him. And about halfway through harvesting is when Daniel arrives. So we have another narrative being generated here, where Jason is halfway through harvesting when opposition forces arrive. So I can generate some objectives there. Jason obviously wants to hold the point so that he can finish harvesting, and Daniel wants to kick him off. That's simple enough. After that force of Jason's either wins or loses, they're going to head down and head to another node. But what they're going to find there is one of Bobby's forces just finishing the harvest. And I'm not really sure how this is going to play out, because it's kind of dependent on how Jason's forces fare in the previous skirmish. If they win, and win well, perhaps they're emboldened and they're going to press forward and try and take the stuff that Bobby's finished harvesting, or they'll play it safe. We've already had one win. We'll let Bobby have the harvest and let him go. If he's lost, maybe he's desperate and he'll try and make a quick grab against Bobby, get what he can and get out. Or he'll say, we've already lost a lot, let's not lose even more. So again, the whole context of the campaign that's happening, all these various skirmishes start to feed into each other, and we can build sort of this layered narrative. At least that's what I'm hoping. That was mostly, very likely, mostly me rambling. So, but I hope that has better illustrated what I mean by the narrative war game. And if I can remember, I'll put a link to a YouTube video that is sort of the inspiration for this style of game for me. But yeah, if you're listening, Sam, thank you again. I would love to hear from you again if you've got thoughts on what I've just talked about then. If you've got any advice or tips for running more narrative style war games, because that's something that I'm very interested in. So, and interested in learning about. So, thank you so much, and that's going to be the entire episode. It's running very long, so I'm going to skip some of the usual segments. Next episode, I will provide a full play report of the narrative war game. I'm going to play out some of these skirmishes and finish the turn over the weekend, and provide that back to the players so we can continue the cycle. And we're going to run 3 turns at this stage. So thank you so much for listening to this much longer than normal episode. As always, the details for my callers are in the show notes. Please check out their podcasts. Really great conversations going on there. And the details for where you can how you can contact me will also be in the show notes. But that's it, and bye for now.